staff has suggested September 22nd at 9 o'clock. Are there any issues or questions concerning that September 22nd at 9 o'clock date?
Motion to set.
Second.
Before I call the vote, I see Commissioner Starling is checking his calendar. Just,
I'm fine. I'm fine.
okay, all right. We'll then call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? With no opposition, the motion carries. The next issue on the agenda is item 15, which is discussion and approval of next year's budget. With that, I'd like to turn this over to AOE Roberts for discussion of the budget.
Commissioners, in your packet, you have two sheets. They represent our annual operating budget and then the election budget. The election budget reflects the August 23rd, the September 23rd, and the March 24th elections that would fall in next fiscal year. The operating budget essentially is the same budget that we have in the current year. Should the administration and the council vote on additional salary package for employees, they will automatically put that into our budget. It's not pre-populated in that fashion. We tried to add a little bit of information to the right of the numbers just so that you can get a general idea of what we spend the money on. And the election budget, it's broken down between early voting and election day. What we would spend. Now, we have mentioned previously that in these numbers, we included enough money to, if the commission chose to, go to all of our sites being open the full 14 days. We did that because it's easier to put a placeholder with Metro Finance of here's our total request. We can come back before that request is actually submitted to the council and adjust it downward if we need to. Adjusting it upward would be a little more challenging. We did that because we anticipated that you might have received calls during October of 22, like I and the rest of the staff did, as to why we did not have all of our sites open. So just to give you a little history as to what precipitated us putting the money in there and why we wanted to put it so that the commission would have an opportunity to go essentially either way and it not present a problem. So that's the budget. I'm happy to ask any questions. We will be asking and have included in our request an improvement budget of $701,000. That's to buy equipment. That equipment is to make sure that we can satisfy our equipment needs going into the presidential cycle beginning with the March election. So we'll be ordering 30 more scanners, 60 more ballot marking devices, an additional 100 poll books, and we're adding a new piece of equipment this time to early voting. It will, when you get your white ballot card, before the clerk hands you that, they will stick that card in the printer and it will identify your precinct and ballot style so that when you take it to the machine operator and the ballot marking device, You will stick it in. It will automatically bring up your precinct. Right now, and what some of the issues we've had, the machine operator has to bring up the right precinct, 178 of those, and the correct ballot style. Some precincts have 5 different ballot styles. We're hoping this will put us in a better position that voters get the correct ballot and we have fewer errors, human errors, as far as during early voting. It will also allow the process to move much more quickly. Your ballot style will automatically come up as opposed to the machine operator having to touch the screen and those kind of things. So again, trying to move the traffic through the early voting sites because that's where we traditionally have experienced the largest volume of voters on any particular day. So all of this is trying to get prepared for the 2024 presidential cycle.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I love that.
We
That's
think
such a huge
it will make a big difference. That's the goal here.
I've got one question. So in that $700,000+ you alluded to, do we have ample spare machines or are they accommodated in that number?
Right. The problem that we're at right now is that for any particular election, we're very slim on the number of spare machines we have, because if you think about it, we've increased by 18 the number of precincts. That consumes all of your spare machines. This will put us in a much better position to handle emergencies and those kind of things.
That's good. Good.
Could I ask this? If we were to implement this new system and somehow it comes up the wrong precinct, will they be able to manually insert, or how does that work?
Sure. We, just like today, you can have a do-over if something is not correct. That is still available to the voter. So we want to make sure that we've created a system for the voter to give them the most flexibility possible. Everything is available, flexible, until you stick that ballot in the scanner. Then we can't back up.
Okay. What do we call these precinct directors? You know, what do we call that? What kind of equipment is that?
The precinct, so the printer, it's called an activation card printer. So if you view the ballot as a card, it's going to activate that card with your specific information of your precinct and ballot style. Not you personally, your demographics, but your precinct and your ballot style. That way, when you stick it into the ballot marking device, it automatically brings up the correct ballot. It doesn't take intervention from a human to bring up the correct ballot.
How many of those are we going to get?
110.
Okay. And then who's the vendor? Who's supplying this new equipment?
It's our current vendor is supplying the equipment. So
It's ES&S?
right, we have to make sure that we can't introduce a new vendor and have mixed equipment. We have to have all of the same stuff.
Are there any procurement issues? Or does this have to go through a bid process or anything, or has this all been approved by Metro Procurement?
The way that the current contract was written, we can buy essentially anything that ES&S has with a defined discount. So that was part of the contract when we did the last RFP.
Okay, so we're getting a discount?
Right. I mean, we're always going to negotiate a discount. We're not going to pay off the shelf.
Okay. When do we anticipate getting this new equipment?
It would be after September election. So you think about, while all of the equipment is out of the warehouse, we're going to have to rearrange, renumber everything in the warehouse floor, because every piece of equipment has a specific home. While it's out, we're going to renumber so that when the new equipment comes in, we're already prepared to put it in the right place.
And we've got enough room, I assume. There's plenty of room out there for this.
We've got enough room. The problem is we have to plan for how much room we're in. There's enough room overall, but the way we're currently set up, we're going to have to tinker with it a little bit.
All right. Now you said after the September election, which is great, but do we know when we were going to get it before? That wouldn't. I mean, that's going to be the concern, that we get it in time.
We think it's going to be, in talking with our vendor, sometime around the 1st of October.
Okay. So you believe we'll have time to implement this and incorporate all this new equipment into what we're doing?
Well, if you think about it, the new equipment is just, it's not really new equipment. It's just more of the same kind of equipment that we already have, except for the activation card printers.
Right.
And that would be where we would be focused on getting prepared then between October and March, so that we can implement the new process for the presidential primary.
Is this a net increase of, I think you said 30 scanners, 60 ballot markers, and 100 poll books? Is that a net increase, or are some of them like becoming obsolete or breaking, et cetera, in the meantime?
I would say a majority of this is an increase. When let's take the poll books. We have 800 poll books now. Those are simply tablets that some of you may have. Those have a useful life of, 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So you're naturally going to have some failure that you have to replace. This would cover failures that we've already experienced and additional equipment that we need to satisfy the growing voting population in Davidson County.
All right. Any other questions on that?
Mr. Chairman, not necessarily on that particular thing. It's a question on the budget itself. Under the, and I know you probably didn't have no way to know this, but pending legislation that's in the General Assembly right now could cause additional elections. Have we considered all, and once you put this together, you probably didn't know this legislation was coming out, but if we have to have additional elections, how does that affect our budget?
Should we have, I guess, some great confidence that we will have additional elections in this fiscal year, we would either update the budget that we have submitted to reflect that need, or what is more likely to happen is that the finance department would recognize the potential for our needs of a supplemental at some point down the road, and not go ahead and put the money out there and tie it up, but just in case, they would have it on their radar that a supplemental need may exist.
Okay. And I was just concerned, that we didn't have to use our budgetary money now, and then we get to a point that we can't do some of the things we need to do, like equipment and so forth.
Right. I think I would view it the same way that when redistricting happened, because of how many changes we had to make, we had to send voter registration cards to a much larger audience. The council recognized that, and when we asked for a supplemental for more money for voter registration cards postage, that wasn't an issue. They recognized that was something we had to do.
And I don't know if this is in the right order or not, but if this legislation were to pass and go forward, and it will create redistricting in Metro. How does that affect us as far as election commission? We could very well go from 35 to 20. And is it a cost involved in rearranging all the stuff that we need to rearrange?
No, I think, and I looked at the fiscal note on the bill, and I assume that the legislature had contacted Metro GIS because it was stated in there that there would not be a cost to redistrict because Metro has its own, they can do it. They have their own geocoding team of staff, and they could do that. Now, I don't know that for sure, but there was no cost associated on the fiscal note for the actual redistricting process going down to 20 council districts.
Yeah, and to just kind of follow up on that, and I know we had some issues on the last redistricting, and, I just didn't want us to get caught, without the knowledge of the cause and, with the state being involved in the redistricting somewhat, it became an issue for us, and I just don't know where we are with this right now.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll jump into my AOE presentation a little bit, but we have recognizing that this potentially could come down the pike. We have already, in fact, we're close to being finished with a match with Metro IT right now. I spoke with Jeremy and staff yesterday, and I think we're like 95% there. After that point, we will seek out direction from the comptroller, try to do a match with them so that when we go into, if we have to redistrict, Metro's files, our files, and the comptroller, we're all in agreement going in. And then we would then do checking after we do the redistricting so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page.
I just want to make sure I understand. So not included in this would be the cost of printing new voter registration cards for every voter in Davidson County if we had to redistrict.
That's correct. That cost is not anywhere right now. For the last, back in May of last year, we spent right at $246,000 printing and mailing voter registration cards.
Okay.
So that cost is going to be there, and we will have that. And we're required to send a new voter registration card to voters if anything changes around their district.
Okay, so if the legislation were to pass, it says that the fiscal note is nothing, but it sounds like, at least for us, Metro would, somebody is going to have to pay roughly $250,000 to reissue those voter registration cards.
Right. When I looked at the fiscal note, right now it has Metro having a savings because of the reduced number of council people.
Okay.
It doesn't speak to us having to send out new voter registration cards. That's something we will have to do, and there's a cost of $250,000 to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Question. So going back to the GIS issues, and I know you said this wasn't on the fiscal note either. So where are we in regards to current compliance with not just Metro, but with the state in regards to GIS?
We're in compliance. I think one of the things that we've decided to do essentially is before each election, we're going to do a match with our database, Metro GIS, and then if the state will participate, and I assume they will, we'll do a match with the comptroller's office to make sure that all three of us are on the same page. Because if you can think about it this way, every time Metro changes the name of a street, every time we tear down a house and build three on that same lot, we have to make sure we've got those recorded correctly in all three spaces. And the only way to do that is if we're on a regular basis doing what they call geocoding. And we've started that process with Metro GIS and are almost finished. So we anticipate we'll be running this by the state so that before we go into, should the bill pass and we have to redistrict the council districts, we will know going in we're all in good shape. After we redistrict, we'll do a comparison again. Are we still in good shape? So that everyone can feel good going in that we've done as many checks as are possible and everyone feels confident that the information is correct.
Okay.
I've got a question. Mr. Roberts, how many elections does this budget assume? How many elections does it call for?
So it assumes the known elections that are out there. We've got, because the fiscal year begins in July, we've got the August, the September, and the March presidential primary.
Okay. So that's a minimum, and
That's a minimum.
it could be more.
Could be more, but those are what I would call really unknown at this point in time. We have no real idea if there's going to be another election at all.
Okay. That 88, let's just assume that we open early voting full bore, which is the issue before us. That's going to be, is it going to be 88,000 for every election that we have if we decide to be consistent with that?
That would be 88,000 for every election that we have. So each of those elections, if you look at that, they're at 1.1 million ballparkish. So those include enough funds right now to be able to do early voting at all the sites for all 14 days. If the commission chooses to go with the schedule that we've traditionally used, we will reduce that request with Metro Finance to reflect that 88,000 coming out of each of those elections. So we'll be closer to right at $1 million for each election.
Anything else on that topic? All
We
right.
don't need a motion to.
No, I don't think we do. Oh, wait a minute,
Yes.
for the budget?
For the budget as
Yeah.
a whole, the commission does have to take action.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the budget as proposed.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget for FY 23-24. With that motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? With no opposition, the motion carries. Item 16 is the AOE report. Mr. Roberts, can you just give us your report and hopefully we'll have some questions?
Sure. So we've spoken some about our preparation. One, to follow up on the issues that we had in November around redistricting, what we've done since then, and how we plan to prepare for elections going forward, where we would, on a regular basis, do a match with Metro GIS to make sure that we have everyone in the correct district, no matter what changes happen throughout the year, because while redistricting is a once every 10-year issue, we have ongoing every week, every month, things change in Davidson County as far as apartment complexes are built and streets are renamed and changes with lot lines, those kind of things. So we think it's in our best interest if we create a protocol where we do this type of match on a regular basis. That leads into our preparation for the potential of the legislature passing a bill to reduce the council. We are taking steps to prepare. So the agenda you had today, where you acted on things all the way out to the September runoff, that's all in preparation so that as changes are happening, we've got as much stuff off your plate now as we can so that you're more easily able to react to any changes that come down the pipe. You'll notice that we did not put on there the date that we will certify the runoff election. That will be up in the air depending on how big the runoff election might be. So, if we only had 2 offices on the ballot, we can probably do it much quicker. So those kind of things are still a little fluid. We've also need for the commission and to consider when you want to have a meeting in April. We're suggesting on or about April 21st. Because the new commission will be appointed the 1st of April, we have 20 days to organize. Might be a good idea if you guys go ahead and kind of get that on your schedule and let's just be prepared in the event it happens. Like the chairman said, if we need to then have other meetings around that date, we can. But all of our efforts are to try to get ready and put you in a position to react to anything that you need to do should legislation change the way that we do business here in Metro or across the state. I think we think we're in good shape. We have a meeting scheduled after this meeting with the staff where we're specifically going to talk about the petition process. That begins the 20th of March. We may or may not know whether or not the legislation is passed, but we need to be prepared to go. Probably, we will design a process where we are collecting petitions for the current 35 districts, but come up with a process of how we migrate, should the bill pass, to only 20 districts. The qualifying deadline is the 18th of May. We have a very short window to get all the new districts drawn, notify the public, get the candidates, make sure they know what district they're running in. So everything we can do to get organized on the front end, that's what we're trying to make happen here. Starting today with this commission meeting, really. Questions, concerns?
I appreciate all the work on the front end that you all are trying to do to prepare for something that you don't know what it looks like, right? I mean, I think it's really hard to prepare for something and you don't know what it looks like. I just want to make sure I understand, and I appreciate the fact that there's all the matching going on after, I think everybody knows we had some significant issues with redistricting last time around when when those changes were made. And now it looks like we're going to have to go through that process again, but probably impacting every voter in Davidson County or pretty close. Where before, I don't necessarily know that it impacted everybody. So I appreciate the fact that y'all are working so hard to check that and check it again and check it again, because we all learn, right? As we do it more, we learn more. So I appreciate that. I am increasingly concerned, however, about the very, very tight timeline and notifying the public of changes and what your council district is and where you're supposed to vote and who you're voting for and who the candidates are. It seems like that's going to be a significant issue. And I think as we found, when changes happen very quickly, people, the royal people, don't necessarily, I think, understand or think about what happens on the ground when voters literally don't know where to go or don't know who they're voting for, and the blowback that you get on that. I think it creates voter suppression. I think it undermines people's faith in elections. And just creates massive confusion. I don't doubt that we are capable of educating people on those things and getting them ready for it. But I mean, between March 20th and May 18th, we don't even know if we'll have an answer then. And that's only 8 weeks. There's really not enough time to get all this done in such a short period of time. I understand that we may not have a choice, but the communication aspect of it to the voter and the voter confusion issue is a very significant concern to me. And I don't really know what we can do to address it. Has anybody mentioned to anybody any outside of the commission's going to be working full bore to get everything done in a short period of time. I guess I'm wondering if we know if that legislation happens, has anybody taken responsibility for educating the voters? Has anybody heard? Has anybody thought about it?
Do you have information?
You know, as speaking for the staff at the commission, we're the implementers. We can't really get out there and say a whole lot about whether or not we support or don't support or any of this stuff, because our focus is, however it shakes out, how can we be best prepared to pull it off? And believe me, we'll be super busy between now and 1st of May just to get ready. But that'll be our focus, and we will pay as much attention and devote as many hours as necessary.
Comments is really to your point, and I think you raised a very good point, by the way. Spitball. Would it be an interesting thought to maybe consider having someone in charge of communications for that particular part that would work specifically with our election commission in your office specifically to be the tip of the spear on that? Because if that were to happen, and maybe we can look at it, going forward, that, we put in someone in charge to do that. I mean, with all the digital assets at this time period, it might be very well, a good idea for us to do that. Therefore, it would in turn lead to more voter engagement. It would also head off maybe some other issues that we've had in the past, as well as, especially if this were to happen by way of the state. I mean, anything we could do to get out in front and, full press our constituents about the changes and engaging them about it, that might be a thought process.
I anticipate as soon as, should the bill pass, that the mayor's communication team will be contacting us to try to put forth a coordinated effort, because mayor's office, council, all have a big, stake in this. So they're going to want to play a big role, probably even larger than our role. and I would anticipate that they will contact us immediately to share a plan as to how they would like to communicate this across all of Davidson County's population.
Okay, and I'm just throwing it out there as, like I said, a spitball. Do we want to at least think about having someone in place within the office, if you will? And I don't, to truly just head that up and or be on top of it. And I'm looking at this strictly from a, making sure that we can address the issue of engaging the public as best as possible, just as a spitball.
Right. And right now, today, I would say our person that we have for that would be Lisa.
Okay.
She's the point person with the mayor's office, with the council, does our social media. So I would be leaning on Lisa. In fact, Lisa and I spoke last night about what we were going to be doing.
Well, I'm asking that.
She probably won't let this out of this room.
Well, then don't take, since we're on camera.
Right, but I contact her at all hours of the day and night.
Well, I said, I just wanted to put out there in public too, because we wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we didn't make sure we got ahead of as many things as we could. And with this potentially coming down the pike, we want to make sure we engage all the voters we can to make sure that they understand the changes that could very potentially well happen, and make sure we do everything we can to empower our voters to do that, which is vote.
I think following up on your suggestion, to me, that's probably as big a piece of the whole process as all of the other things that we need to do to get prepared. So we will be spending a lot of time on that, and if we need more of anything, we'll be coming to the commission, to the council, whoever we need to go to make sure we educate the public on should anything happen.
That's my concern. Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on these comments, which is really, really great. And I do know that one thing that we did not talk about, and probably maybe we shouldn't even talk about it, but it could possibly be pending litigation with this, which will stretch things out further. And then we're looking at timetables then. We're looking at, we got elections here in June, July, and this thing gets pushed back. I assume we'll get prepared for that if that was the case as well.
Some of our thoughts over the last couple of days is that we're going to have to be prepared to go potentially in either direction, either quickly go to a 20 council district, or things are delayed and we're still doing the 35. We're going to have to be able to go either way, and that's part of our meeting later today, is to figure out, okay, how do we make that happen? Even on the petition process, how do you have petitions for 35 districts and 20 at the same time?
When you haven't done the redistricting yet.
Correct.
And as I looked at the legislation in Section C, it says that the council shall have this done by May the 1st. That's a quick timetable as you look at all these other things that we've got going.
Right. Well, they have to approve the new districts by May 1st. We then have to get them all the voters loaded into those new districts, so that essentially mid-June is when we send out the ballot. So you're having to figure out who's in what district and make sure they're qualified and all of those kind of things.
And just one more caveat to that, we're looking at the military ballots. Where would they be? Where would, they've got a time frame on that. So we definitely don't want disenfranchised, man.
And just to follow up on, I think what the others have said, there's a lot that has to happen. It is very complex in a very, very short amount of time. And I mean, I just want to be really clear that if we're forced to do this as quickly and be as nimble, and I mean, obviously the staff is going to do the very best that they can, but I imagine that there will be mistakes. People will be confused. We can do our very best, but stuff's going to happen. And, I don't want that to land at your feet or, to our feet when people are doing, the very best they can in a very difficult situation. I wish we had more time to, do this a little bit more orderly and give people, time and notice and, time to put it all out there. But absent that, I've got grave concerns about the timeline and the compressed nature of what we're being asked to do. Last time around, we normally only do redistricting once every 10 years. And when we did it last time, that was somewhat compressed, given litigation and other things. And we did see totally unintended, couldn't have anticipated them problems that came up. And I'm just terribly concerned that, that's going to happen again. And, at a larger scale, because now we're doing the whole city. I just want to say it. So if something does happen, we can say we had concerns, at least I did. And, these mistakes that could happen and confusion and all these things, that is anticipated. That's not an unknown, right? Like, we know if this legislation is put on this time schedule, that those things are very likely to happen. And I just kind of wanted to say it out loud for if and when it does, that, we did everything in our power to prevent it.
I believe that there are supposed to be a series of meetings organized by Metro Council in some way to consider this issue about do we do all this year? Do we extend everything? All those kind of things. And I think we should try to be involved in those meetings so we will know immediately what's going on and have some potential impact if there are things proposed that would be a problem for us. So, I'm going to try to follow up, but to the extent you all have your contact with Metro Council, let's try to make sure that our people are at the table when all this stuff is happening, because it is going to happen pretty quickly. And one thing that I had thought about is possibly the need for us to have more meetings during this process, not so much to vote on things, but to communicate about what's going on with us and to try to communicate to the public as much as we can. So there may be a series of meetings that we have in which we're perhaps not going to have motions, but just discuss issues and make sure that we know what's going on and that staff communicates with us and that the public knows that we are trying to keep abreast of these issues. So that's a few things we can do. My other thought would be to ask Mr. Roberts whether there's anything we can do in terms of putting information out to the public that we need to be thinking about now as part of this budget, as part of planning. We don't have a big budget item to, for advertisements, et cetera, but is that something we should consider on our behalf, or do we let Metro do it? I just want to throw that issue out there because it is quite expensive to put ads in the newspaper, et cetera, but we are going to have to deal with the fallout, and it's our responsibility to try to make sure the public knows as much as it can as soon as we can do that. So I'm just throwing that out there as a potential issue. And the other thing is that Commissioner Starling, I think you mentioned litigation, and no question that could happen, and Metro Legal could be representing somebody in that litigation, and that may create issues for us. So please consider, your list of potential lawyers. We may have to hire our own lawyer if there's issues that arise and Metro's got a conflict.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo one thing on that. I think it would be helpful, I think, to know who's going to own what pieces of these communications effort going forward. And I know that maybe some of us, some of Metro, maybe some of Metro Legal, I don't know. But I think it'd be helpful to kind of know how that's going to be rolled out and who's going to own the pieces to that.
Right. And it seems to me at this point that Metro Council may be more on point or more at issue than the mayor's office. Obviously we need to try to touch both areas, but Metro Council is the one that's going to have to make these decisions very quickly, I believe.
No, and I would assume that the vice mayor will probably take a big role in coordinating between the mayor's office and the council to follow up on your suggestion for information sharing, Mr. Chairman. I think an example would be once we've figured out how the petition process might work, that you all have a good understanding of that. So if someone calls you, you can share with them, because it won't be, I don't think, your traditional way we've done petitions in the past. It's going to have to be tweaked, nuanced a little bit so that we can be prepared should things change very quickly on us.
Okay. All right. Anything further on that topic?
I think that's plenty to swallow right now.
Okay. Now, we had the commission put on 2 election integrity seminars. Can you please give us and the public a report on that?
Right. We did offer to both the public and elected officials an opportunity to come to our training facility at the warehouse to see the audit process. Essentially, we mimicked the process that was required by the state for the election. We let people rerun ballots through a different scanner. We even went a step beyond what's required and had the participants actually do a hand recount, and compare that to both the original scanner, the different scanner, and the hand count. I think that really opened the eyes for a lot of folks as to how we do it here in Davidson County, to give them a little more knowledge about elections and what goes on behind the scenes.
All right. Mr. Roberts, is the staff preparing a written policy on redistricting so that 9 years from now, somebody will be able to pull it off the shelf and have the benefit of the experience that we had this year?
I think recognizing that not having that playbook is probably puts the process at a little more risk than we would like to have. That once we get through with our current matching process and our conversations with the state about how they want to do it going forward, we would incorporate all of that into a playbook going forward.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that we have to be aware of, and I'm sure you are, technology is likely to change over the next 10 years, and the whole process could change. But I think it's important for us to document what we experienced and how to avoid those kind of things, so that if I'm not here 10 years from now, whoever is, better informed.
Okay. I've got one other question. To your knowledge, is there anything, and maybe Mr. Starling, who works up on the Hill, can chime in also, is there anything still in the legislature about runoffs? I had heard at one point there was a bill being considered that would eliminate runoffs in local elections. Is that still in play so far as you know?
I hadn't heard anything about potential eliminating runoffs.
Okay.
Now, I know there was some conversations about, what do you call that, choice rank voting?
Ranked choice voting? Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
I think it's been some conversation, but I don't think it's any legislation that I know of that's pending as far as eliminating.
All right. Okay. And the other question I had is, or comment would be that to the extent that the commissioners and the staff come up with potential legal issues that are going to come out of this, it probably would behoove us to try to gather them and start giving them to Metro Legal. The one I had was, is there going to be a charter revision necessary as a result of all of this? And if so, when could that happen? Because that could require another election. That was the one question I had. There may be others.
Right, and I'll let the lawyers speak to the new amendment that was put on, but the way I read that amendment, it gives the council pretty much the authority to do whatever they needed to do to set in place the new provision of having 20.
Right, but I could foresee somebody making an argument that certain aspects of that affect the charter, and that at some point somebody could raise that issue.
My gut on this is probably just to wait and see what, if anything, passes and then kind of deal with it as it comes. I would hate to speculate and kind of get into something. As far as I see it, whatever happens between the state and Metro and whoever passes whatever they're going to pass, like, our job is to kind of do what it says and to get advice from our lawyers if we have a question. But until then, I kind of feel like we should probably not get involved in the legal stuff.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I think what's going on now, it's the bill is moving, it's moved through all the committees in the House. It's set for calendar and rules, which calendar rules will set it for the House floor. The Senate may come up with some amended versions of it. They could amend this or they'd add some things. And if it's two different versions, then you got a conference that would have to come out of it. So right now, it is, what we see now. But it could change. All this could change it.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they could even take it off notice if they wanted to. But I don't speculate that. I mean, we got to move forward as if this legislation is going to pass. So it could change the outlook of it the way it looks right now. What we're looking at right now, what we've got copies of, is what the House version is. Mm-hmm. And so far, everything has been amended to change a few things, but it goes to calendar and rules. Now they can do an amendment on the House floor to change some stuff. Not likely, but it's possible. So, right now we just, and I think the staff has done a fantastic job preparing. I mean, I'm glad to see that we're not just standing there in the corner waiting. Davidson County Election Commission is doing its job. I mean, we're doing, our staff is on top for what little we know right now. Now, I know this stuff, it passed, we just got to go, and the council's got to help redraw the lines. That's another issue. Who's going to draw themselves out of this? I mean, we got 40 council members, and it's going to go down to 20, so half of them will be gone. So if I were a council person, I wouldn't want to draw myself out. So, we got that process to go through. So it's a lot more to this thing. But I'm glad our staff is taking what information we've got, and they've done a great job of preparing. And I really appreciate that.
Anything further on the AOE report?
No, sir.
Ms. Harrison, has anybody signed up for public comment? All right. So let's see, the next thing is that under state law, the commissioners must review a certain number of registration cards, and we do this every quarter, and that is a check that's built into the state statute so that the commissioners personally review voter registration cards, or at least a selected sample of them every quarter, which is the process that we're doing right now. So with that, typically we take a break and the commission continues to do that. Where are we in that process?
The Democrats already finished.
We've got a little bit to go. I'll be done.
About 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, okay. So we've got that, and then we still have the agenda item of the pending motion, and we have the selection of the next meeting. So we'll proceed with the cards, and we'll come back then to item 3.
Why don't we set the next meeting while we're doing the cards?
That's fine.
So if it's, I think the suggested date is April 21st. I'm available that date.
It's good for me.
It's a Friday.
April 20th.
1st.
What about a time?
Afternoon?
Is that 3:30? Still okay for you?
3:30 is fine. Is that fine for you? Eddie?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
All right.
April 21st at 3:30.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Oh, I'll make a motion to set Friday, April 21st at 3:30 for our next meeting.
And a second?
Second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to set our next meeting for April 21, 2023 at 3:30. And let me note, that doesn't prevent us from having a meeting between now and then, but at least we have that marker out there. All right, with that, we'll call a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? With no opposition, the motion carries. And we'll let the card counting continue.
Mr. Chairman, I can give you an update on my conversations with some of the other counties in the state concerning their early voting schedule, if you'd like to hear that now.
Yes.
So I've talked to Shelby County, Knox County, Hamilton County, Rutherford County, and Wilson County. And they all have their schedule set for all of their sites open all days. What I heard from most of them was that was easier for the public to understand, that they didn't have to qualify that this place was open this day and another one was open another day. So
which counties are those?
Shelby, Wilson, Rutherford, Knox, Hamilton.
And all those are open all the days that have been suggested by the motion.
Correct.
Okay.
And those are the only ones that I called. I tried to get kind of a mixture of big ones and a couple close by here. So
those 5 counties do go to the max.
they go the max.
Okay, and they've reported no problems.
Right. Their comment was that even logistically, it was better for the public because they didn't have to explain why some were open some days and some were open others. So they would stick with that.
And do you have a feeling for how many other counties do the same thing?
I do not know. Once you get into the smaller counties, they really have different schedules, they may only have one location. So trying to get a representative group of folks that we are kind of like what was the goal here. You know, comparing us to Obion County and what they do really doesn't make a lot of headway.
I'm impressed you got that many people on the phone that quickly.
Speed down.
Well, I do have, 6 people back there giving me phone numbers, so.
Great work, guys.
We did talk to our locations, and everyone said that they would work with us to make that happen. I will put a qualifier in there on the why. We're not going to be able to be in the big room, so us being there the whole time may mean we have a smaller footprint than we have for a bigger election. You know, instead of 6 people, we have 4 clerks checking people in because we can't get that many people in the room that we're in. But right now, it looks like everyone's good to go. I think the only other question maybe you had, Mr. Chairman, was John and the staff. John, have you had any thoughts, want to come up and share? You know, do you anticipate issues, problems? Can you make it happen?
Sure, thank you. So in talking with early voting officers, we are all good to go. We have one early voting officer who may have to have one day covered, but they're all good for the full 2 weeks. And that's for the August and September election days. So we were able to get those nailed down. Anything from locations or? Okay.
So the officers are our biggest, you know, they kind of make it happen out there. If John feels like we've got the officers covered, that's a big logistical hurdle. We can fill in with the machine operators and the PRs, but the officers are normally our biggest concern.
Yeah. That's all you did. Okay.
So let me mention one more thing here. We did talk some about having to send out voter registration cards should the redistricting happen for the council. Just want to make sure everyone knows that even though we have 490,000 registered voters, we would only be sending voter registration cards out to about 450 because the others are currently in an inactive status where there's something wrong with their address. Something we sent to them previously was returned as undeliverable by the post office. So just so that you know going in, we would not send another piece of correspondence to someone that we already know the post office can't deliver to.
right. Now that the cards have been reviewed, let's revisit item 3, the early voting schedule and locations for the August 3rd election. I think we took a recess to allow some of the commissioners to do some homework. Let me ask this question. Do any of the commissioners need more time at this point?
I'll say this. Like I said, I reached out to a couple council members who I have not heard back from, since that was something that came up from the other commissioners. I did actually call out to Knox as well as Shelby County, so I guess you beat me to it because they didn't call me back. So I wanted to say the power of the AOE must have been pretty good, because I have not.
That personal phone number.
It must be, because I called and I was getting the, we'll send you a message back. So from their office staff. Since you brought, my concern is this, let me just put it out there. Since you said there was issues, let me rephrase that. Since you said that there were a number of people from city council who made an issue of it, like I said, I threw out some calls and the little site break we had. And of course, sometimes getting certain council members is a little hard for whatever reason, they're working, whatever else. And so nobody has gotten back with me. Now I will also fall into sort of my cell phone service in this room does not do very well either. So there could be a return call on my phone. That's with the information they provided. That's my only outstanding concern. I mean, like I said, and that's just for me doing my own homework. I don't, if I call, my, city council member, which I did call, to start with, I was the first person who got the first call. I was like, I at least want to have that conversation. Because when I see him down the street, it's, I don't want to be like, hey. But, this seems like the other logistical issues have been satisfied to that part of the discussion.
I think the fact that there's consensus with Knox and Hamilton and Shelby County, I think that bodes well for us.
Commissioner Davis, are you comfortable with voting on this at this point?
I'd vote on it.
Okay, all right. With that, it sounds like we're ready to vote. We have a motion pending. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? With no opposition, the motion carries.
Thank you.
So we have one more item on the agenda. Whoops,
Number
wait.
10. You've got to do the
Oh, goodness.
schedule for the runoff.
Okay. All right.
I will make a motion for the September runoff in the event that it happens. That we have all early voting locations open all 14 days. That's my motion.
Okay. So it would be the same as what we just voted on for
Yes.
item 3.
Yes, sir.
And it would be the same as number 10 on our schedule, but with the increased hours and locations, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? With no opposition, the motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposition, the motion carries. Thank you.